I think we've got a good quorum. I will start. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Heather Monaghan. I am a Gamma chapter alumni, the Xi class from the University of Dayton. And I am really excited to be here today to share the session of negotiating strategies for women in tech. Okay. So I guess everyone's hearing me okay. And one of the things with this format, I do encourage you to ask questions. I want to make this as interactive as possible. Normally, I do prefer to do these face to face, and I try to really play off the energy of the audience and make sure that this is really interactive. So this information is for you. Hopefully, you can relate to some of it and practice it and then implement the information. So we want to make sure that if you've got questions, we'll go and we'll tackle them together as a team here. So, oh, you know what? I am not sharing yet, so let me do this. Okay. So I think everyone is seeing the screen, right? Thumbs up.
Yep. I see a blue
Okay.
slide that says negotiation strategies.
Yay! That's it. Okay. So let's see, it's not, okay, there we go. So one of the things I do like to do is, me personally, when I'm listening to somebody at work, I always kind of want to think in my head, why should I listen to them? It's a fair question. So what I wanted to do was kind of give you a little bit of my background and in regards of negotiation. Why should you listen to me? So I graduated in 2000. I've been in the tech industry for about 21 years. I've got a ton of stories. In fact, one of my favorite things to do is to come back here to the national conference and to share my learnings with all of you and to kind of tell you what it's like in the outside world, at least from my perspective in corporate land. I've had a very technical career, but I've been able to marry my technical skills with the business skills. I now have the honor of being a director at Intel, and I've been able to build up my own team from scratch. And that experience has been fairly recent within the past year and has been a wonderfully rewarding experience. For the past 7 years, though, a lot of my job really centered around business negotiations, working with vendors, actual contract negotiations from a money perspective too. So I have some background from a professional negotiation standpoint. I'm not a lawyer. It's not what I do on an everyday basis, but it is a skill that I use. And one of the things that has interested me so much in negotiation is women usually are a little bit afraid of it. It's not something we naturally, in general, at least I found, it took a long time to hone in on those skills. Oh, just a side note as far as negotiation goes too. Um, Parental negotiation is something I actually do not engage in. So I do, my husband and I do have 2 kids aged 14 and 11. They're upstairs stealing our bandwidth right now. And as far as negotiating with children, my husband and I do have a um, mutual agreement of we do not negotiate with terrorists. So we do like to take on the totalitarian dictatorship parental style. Um, but now we've got teenagers and we are enjoying that journey as that progresses. So I will keep it more professional than parenting. So what are we going to talk about today? I did a poll and we got a really good response rate. So we're going to go and unpack that poll and kind of put it into the context of what we're talking about right now. Then we'll go through some introductions into negotiations. We'll talk about reframing negotiation and maybe invite you to think about it in a different way. We'll go through some what I call neg plans or negotiation plans, and then we'll go through some examples. So you may have an example of something you want to negotiate right now. So we have some opportunity at the end of the session to play around with that and see how that feels to step into that. All right, so let's go over the poll results. Hopefully it put a smile on your face, trying to really show kind of the extremes of people's reaction to negotiation. So the question was, how would you even describe your negotiation style? And I will share this with you. When I was in high school, I was really active in debate club, and I did really resonate initially with the I can argue and crush my opponent and bonus points for watching them cry, because that's really what I thought negotiation was all about. I really, you know, having a daughter now myself, I see a lot of those wonderful traits reflected back at me, and that uh, willingness to argue, the enjoying the sport of arguing actually is a lot different, I think, than what we're going to be talking about today from a negotiation skills perspective. So I was proud to see, actually a little surprised to see that no one really resonated with the I can argue, because I would say that I personally, in the beginning of my journey, really resonated with that. But you can see here, there's been a little bit of a natural distribution from I pick my battles and I really like to win, and that's 46%. So I suspect, a lot of type A's, really intelligent, super hardworking, super organized ladies, right? Which normally what Phi Sigma Rho really resonates with. And I think if I were to peel back the onion a little bit on this particular answer, I suspect there is a feeling of I'm going to put myself out there when I know I can win as well. Maybe. Then I like to find the middle ground. Um, that was about 36%. I actually thought that that was going to be a little higher myself. And then we see we've got some of more of a natural distribution, I would say, to the last two of I will reluctantly, but I don't like to rock the boat. And then on the same line as I like to watch my enemies cry to silence. So what I wanted to do here was kind of ground you into what we're talking about through the entire session. So you can kind of map and you can tell perhaps from my color choices, I'm an electrical engineer. So red and black and green, white, those colors resonate with me. So um, if I were all the way to the left side of things on this particular bar spectrum, and this spectrum actually appears throughout in the entire session, so I want to kind of ground you on my definitions here. All the way on the left, actually not even on the spectrum, arguably not all the way to the left, not even on there, is uh, only one side of negotiation, and that's 100% just for you to the extreme. Then from the silence point of view on the spectrum here, arguably all the way on the right side with the black arrow, is you're not even trying to negotiate. There is no negotiation. You're just going to accept what the other party is offering. And then there's a lot in the middle. And I think that's one of the biggest things I want everyone to start looking at here, that it's a spectrum. And there's a point that where we put the white arrow here right in the middle of trying to find a middle ground. But I would argue that, there's a lot of give and take there, and there's a lot of gray area. In my experience, a lot of engineers sometimes have hard time with the gray area, but I invite you thinking about it as an opportunity to reframe it a little bit. Okay, so let's play with this graphic because it appears throughout the entire presentation. So let's call this the negotiation vantage point. Let's say you're the blue and your opponent or the person that you're negotiating with, actually using the terminology or even language of opponent, even puts an adversarial spin on it. And you'll know, hopefully, that's what I want to reframe here. It's not an adversary. It's someone else you're trying to talk with, right? So you've got the the blue position and the green position. And normally you would see this as there's something that I want to negotiate, and the green person also has a vantage point that they also have their own interests. They have what they think is a success point and a middle ground too. So what I want to do is think about, okay, we already said that thinking about the green person over there as an adversary is probably not healthy. So we really want to think about it in a reframing position. Everybody here has a strong inclination, if not an engineering major, then a strong inclination from a science point of view and problem solving. Does that kind of resonate with everybody? You think from your skill toolbox, problem solving is probably pretty darn high up there. I, I would suspect that if we were truly face to face, I would see a lot of noddings at this time. So, given that you may not like negotiation, but you're all really good at problem solving, let's think about negotiation in a different way. Let's think about negotiation as problem solving. Hmm, how does that feel? So let's think about it as we already talked about all the way to the left, all the extremes, all the way to the left and all the way to the right is probably not a good area to be, but there's a whole bunch of wiggle room in the middle here, right? And what if we stopped thinking about negotiation as me versus you or us and them, but what if we thought about as coming together to solve a problem? What if we thought about negotiation as there is a problem that needs to be solved, and you and I can work together to come to that solution? Hmm, maybe that feels a little bit different than the initial poll that we took. Any reactions to that? I'm gonna poke the audience now. I didn't even see anything in the chat. All right, a little quiet this morning. It's okay. All right, so rethinking. Now, Margaret Neal, within this presentation, and I think I sent out a little bit of the pre-work, Margaret Neal is a fantastic lady who I use a lot from a resourcing perspective. She's really good at putting this in terminologies from a woman's perspective too. And I personally have used this for negotiation within work, her techniques. So she says that negotiation is about finding a solution to your counterpart's problem that makes you better off than you would have been had you not negotiated. Even that reframing, even that looking at negotiation from a different vantage point or a different perspective, that already, to me at least, feels a lot different. As an engineer, thinking about negotiation as, there's something to be uncovered here. There's a problem that we need to identify that we can together work to solve. I think it puts a little bit more of a positive spin on it, and it makes it a lot more approachable, especially for women in tech. All right, so Margaret Neal talks about a negotiation process, and it's a pretty straightforward process in regards of she believes that there are three different phases to it with two side notes around those three phases. So the first phase is assess, and as super duper problem solvers, I would venture to guess that this is very um, uh, common to you, or you can probably relate to this a lot more. So is there a problem here? Identifying a problem, that's basic problem solving. I am famous for saying, oh, okay, reframing. Reframing makes it seem less intimidating, doesn't it? Yes, I believe so too. Um, Okay, changing the mindset from adverse to yes, absolutely. Because the person that you're negotiating with, you know, let me take a pause here. So just once, I was able to do the used car negotiation. It was actually a brand new car. And it was my husband actually was the one who gave up. I mean, that's really, I think, when you're getting into a situation where it's a little bit more tense, a little bit more adversary. But, you know, even reframing that and looking at it a little differently, they got to eat too, right? They got to sell a car. You want to buy a car. You got to meet somewhere in the middle. And the best outcome of any deal, truly, is that both parties leave smiling. The best deal is when both parties leave feeling like that was a good deal. I'm okay with that. You don't ever really want to leave the deal thinking that you totally um, got what you want for the degradation of the other party. And conversely, you don't want to sign up for a deal that that is not good for you. And here's why. People have memories, okay? Especially in business. You might get away with absolutely crushing your opponent or negotiating a deal that's so one-sided. You might get away with that once. But if your job is to build relationships, and for instance, my job is I work a lot with external vendors, I can't blow all of my goodwill in one bad deal. If I negotiated one deal where I got these fantastic financial terms, even for my management, I would inadvertently be hurting my business long term because the people that I work with, they're not going to change. The vendors that I work with, it's a small world. I'm still going to have to see these people on a daily basis. So the relationship there is really what's important. And reframing it and thinking about negotiation as I'm building a relationship and I want to I want to get an agreement where the other party actually thinks that we're better off afterwards than before. That's a much better outcome. So the first part of the process here, from an assess point of view, I would argue that all of you are very good at this. You know how to define a problem. I am famous at work for saying it's the alcoholism phrase, right? Uh, if you don't identify a problem, you can't ever solve that problem. So um, giving a lot of kudos and a lot of credit for being able to identify what a problem is and even is, and then define that problem. Defining that problem is not easy. I would say that there's a lot of sessions in regards to understanding how you define a problem. But again, I would invite you that we, as highly capable, highly intelligent, highly functioning women, we know how to problem solve when we're really good at that. Okay, so we got that down. We got the assessment down. High fives, everyone, right? So now the next phase is prepare. You gotta know your stuff. You gotta know your facts. You gotta know your research. All right, not too bad, right? That's not bad. You all know how to research. You all know how to spend hours and hours in the labs. You all know how to go and attack a problem and get the data to support it. Okay, all right, not so bad, right? Okay, the next bullet. Knowing what you want. That's a tough one. I would say that, in my career, that has been the hardest to really know what you want. Spending that time to kind of identify, regardless of what you want to negotiate, you've got to do some tough self-reflecting. You've got to really look inside yourself and really think about what that really means. We're going to do some examples and we'll get down into the nitty gritty of that. But I will tell you, of negotiation, the hardest part is really know thyself and knowing what you want. Then the third part and the final phase, and it can be an iterative process, but it's ask. And I will tell you from my own personal experience, practice. You gotta practice. You might think it's kind of dorky to, talk in the mirror or talk to your stuffed animals. I've even done it. I don't care how old you are. You can do it. They don't talk back. It's great. Um, or you've got to do that role playing. You've got to figure out and gameplay from a business point of view. We actually will call this game playing. I call it what are the different pawns on the chessboard, right? I will look at it from the other person's vantage point. I will try and walk in the other person's shoes, or sometimes it's an entity, and sometimes it's not even a single person. But I'll do that role playing, and I'll figure out what do I think the other person's going to say, what do I think I'm going to say, and I actually practice it. Then Margaret reminds us that within this framework of the assess, prepare, and ask, she calls it a package the ask. And I kind of started here. This is kind of grounding us again and reminding us you're not going to war, right? You're actually packaging, she calls it packaging the ask. You're actually setting yourself up or inviting the other person into an opportunity to solve the problem together and come out to a better outcome together. So that's how she's calling that the package the ask. And then the other thing that Margaret talks about is adopting a powerful mindset. And we're going to go through an exercise about that as well later on within the presentation. Okay, so this is reframing negotiation, and this is talking about a negotiation process. So let me know if you've got any questions as well. Okay, so I'm skipping because we've already said, we've already pretty much agreed, unless there are specific questions about problem solving. I think we've pretty much agreed that the assessing a situation, everyone is really good at here. We know how to define a problem, we know how to do the problem solving, but the prepare part might be some of the areas where we want to go deeper into. So given that, this is the next part of the presentation. So I call it a neg plan. This is actually what I use at work, and it is pretty formal. There are, sometimes there's about 100 different points, and we'll do it in more like an Excel sheet because I think in Excel. And we actually type out what our wish list is and what the walk is. Now, again, the idea here is somewhere in the middle is probably the best outcome because that way both parties feel like we came to a solution together. But within a negotiation plan, it's great to start out with that selfish view. It's great to start out with if the world were completely perfect and I was waving my magical unicorn wand, what would the world look like? And that's your wish list. It may not even be realistic, but that's okay. It's actually part of the process. Kind of gets you thinking a little bit, and it gets your creative juices going. Then you have to think about your walk. And this gets really hard because it goes back to the what do you want? Sometimes when you're entering into negotiation, you may not have a walk. Sometimes, for instance, a car is a good analogy here. If you're gonna, sometimes your walk is, well, then I won't buy the car. Yes, of course, you can kind of think about, storming out of the dealership and, that little dramatic pause that you can do within your negotiation. It looks really nice in your head, but when you're actually doing it, it may not work as well, right? So you may not have a direct walk. That's okay too, but you've got to identify that. You've got to consciously plan and write down the fact that, no, I actually need a car. So eventually I have to get a car. I can't just walk away from the car because there are things, ironically, I can't walk to, need a car for. So listing, going through the motions of being able to write down your wish list and your walk, and then understand kind of what are some of the options in the middle. It helps you to start thinking about the actual research part of the prepare. Then the other thing that's really important is thinking about the other person, because the other person in the negotiation, they have needs too. Remember, we reframed this and thought this is all problem solving. This is all about identifying a problem that both you and I have and thinking about how we can come together to make it better for the two of us. There any questions here? Any comments? Resonating? Okay. All right. Okay. So we're going to do an activity. So who has ever heard of power posing? I am one of my secret things is I, of course, share this all with you. Um, I watch Grey's Anatomy, and I actually, if you text me and you say I have a job interview, I have a big presentation, I'm really nervous, I will literally text you back, and I've done it so many times to all my girlfriends. I will say, okay, Wonder Woman pose, or sometimes Superman, but I like the Wonder Woman better. So again, power posing. How do you do a power pose? Okay, and hopefully, I think you can start seeing me on the screen here, right? Shoulders back. In fact, you're gonna do it all now. It's a good mid session stretch anyway, okay? You're gonna go shoulders back. Pushing your shoulders back actually makes your chest expand, so your chest is gonna go out. You're gonna stand up, and I'm gonna stand up with you. We're gonna stand up together, and you're gonna have your legs about wider than a hip width apart, right? And you're going to breathe into it. And you're going to look like Superman or Wonder Woman or whatever hero you're thinking of. But you're going to actually feel a little bit more confident. And I promise you, I know it sounds a little woo-woo. I get it. A little woo-woo, a little wackadoodle, that's fine. But you'll see me before any presentation, whether it's in the ladies' room or whether it's in my cubicle, doing this. I will actually put my shoulders back, my chest out. I will do this. I will visualize. I will center myself. And this is something that I tell all of my girlfriends. It's just, it might feel silly, but at the end of it, you do. You feel charged. You feel more centered. You feel more composed. And this is how you will carry yourself into the negotiation or the presentation or whatever you have. Um, Margaret talks about it. There's a lot of TED Talks about it as well. But I'm sharing this with you. This is actually one of my personal hacks. You can see my Wonder Woman montage behind me. So I highly recommend this. Has anyone used this before? Okay, so someone is saying a high school teacher had to practice this before the AP test, use it many times. It is so true. It is so true. And you know, I'm not a smoker, and one of the things I've read a lot about the habit of smoking is the fact that you're actually practicing deep breathing. Now, of course, as a mom, I will tell you you're breathing in toxic chemicals, and you shouldn't do that. However, um, one of the things about breathing is it decreases your heart rate, you're getting more oxygen in, you're centering yourself. So those techniques are really important and can help here too. All right, so I'm getting some messaging in. I'm just going to kind of scroll down a little bit. Okay, so I like using power poses before going into interview. It boosts my confidence every time. High five, sister, absolutely. And if you were texting me right before that interview, that's exactly what I would tell you to do. So I highly recommend it. I still use it. And think about that in your toolbox when you're doing the negotiation as well. Okay, so hopefully you got up. We did that. We're gonna go back. Okay, so we're gonna do some rubber hits the road here. Okay, so we've already talked about step one is think about a problem you want to solve by negotiation. Step two is practice, 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 and step three is the ask. Now, The next slide, I'm going to tell you what the next slide is. The next thing we are going to talk about is salary negotiations, because I know that that was some questions that we were getting beforehand. So I'm going to open this up now. Is there something, now that you kind of got this level setting and we've reframed it, is there something that anybody is thinking about, a problem that they'd like to solve with another person that they would love to volunteer here and we'll walk through? And it's a very safe, wonderful environment, and this is a safe place. Does anyone have a something that they want to utilize here from a negotiation? Or maybe even something you've done in the past too. Okay, so this is where I am gonna pause, and anything,
Hi,
um,
this is Nicole.
yeah, hi Nicole.
Hi, so mine's specific yet general. So like I'm in an individual contributor role and I want to move into a role of leading a team. And so I've had some very detailed discussions with what that means. And of course, within my company, there's like, you know, roles that are the obvious step. And how do you talk through those conversations or have those negotiations that come out in a more definitive answer other than yes, we'll keep you in mind or yes, I agree? So it seems like you get a lot of generic answers easily, but how can you push towards a more definitive answer from people?
Oh, Nicole, this is great. Thank you so much for asking this. Um, and I've been in this situation before. And what I will say is, uh, companies companies are in the business, even nonprofits, companies are in the business to make money. And one of the things I would invite you to do is think about um, think about if you were in a leadership position, what problem could you solve for the company? Think about, is there something that the company is struggling with right now? Is there something that you have particular insight on, or you have a particular passion or even skill set to specifically address? And I would invite you to start thinking about that conversation of, not that I am just in, I Nicole am interested in stepping into management. I would invite you to think about it as, once Nicole is a manager, what can I do for the company? And then I would invite you to dream on that and push it a little bit further. Because I would say, what problem can you identify, and how are you part of that solution? And how can you craft that next step in your career as being a team lead, as being a manager, as being a visible lead within the organization, of solving that problem? That's a little bit more crisp than, I'm interested in management and I'd like to be considered for the next role opening up. You're actually turning the tables and saying, I know I'm interested in management, I know I'm interested in leadership, and this is what I'm noticing that the company needs to go. This is the problem I'm identifying, and this is how I'm part of the solution.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I will say, by the way, that's exactly what I did to build up my office. So I had an opportunity where, I I was given an opportunity to give a proposal of a problem within the organization, and I did exactly that. I identified what the problem was in the organization. I identified how I would go about solving it, inclusive of an org chart, by the way. Um, and it became a proposal. And that proposal became a conversation with my vice president at the time. And we did do some negotiation, and then it turned into reality from that. So good luck. I would love to hear more about that, but I think, inviting you into thinking about it from the company's point of view, from what problem can you solve by your establishment of leadership and what you could do for the company will get you a lot further and will get it in more specifics. Okay, so there's some good comments here in regards of breaking into management from an IC role, make a case from an intern for 9 months. There was enough work for an additional employee at the end of 9 months. I was able to hire the full-time intern. Yeah, same thing here of you're identifying what is the problem for the organization and how you can solve it. By the way, this is from Kathleen to everybody. I would say the other thing, and I have here on the slide, I would also give a point that women tend to be more successful negotiating on behalf of someone else. So in this sense that Kathleen was saying that she was making a case for keeping her intern on, more often than not, and this is the research from Margaret Neal, women tend to be much more successful negotiating on behalf of someone else. It goes into that perception that you're identifying a problem for the organization and you're putting forth a solution to that. It's a strength that women have, so I would encourage all of you to think about putting that into your negotiation toolbox as well. Any other, the next slide, I promise we're going to go into some salary negotiations, but any other questions here that we can kind of talk about and use this? I'm wondering, Nicole, do you still want to play around with your example as well? I don't know if we want to go through it even deeper, we can do that as well. Or if there's another example.
I
I'm
have a
open.
question
Yeah,
or an example.
sure.
I'm wondering if you can even hear me.
Yeah, I
Okay.
can. Is this Karen?
Yes. Hi.
Hi. Hey, how you doing? Good to hear from you.
Yes, definitely. So one of the problems I have a certain person who I deal with who, no matter how I approach the issue, he never seems to see that there's a problem. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, how do you convince this person that there is an issue to deal with in the first place? Or that it's like, I feel like I'm beating my head against a brick wall, which while I'm used to it, is not something I enjoy.
Sure, sure. And I think that goes into the first step here of you see it as a problem, but the other person doesn't see it as a problem. So what I would suggest would be to ask questions. In my experience from a professional stance, one of the most effective things that I've been able to do from a managerial perspective or leadership perspective, just been to ask a lot of questions. And there's something called the 5 whys. So trying to, we'd use the terminology of peeling back the onion or trying to get down to the root cause. One effective way, at least I've found in my career, has been to ask some questions, but really listen. Sometimes when we're asking questions in our heads, we're already like thinking about how we're gonna respond and how we're gonna like fight back, right? So I would invite you to not ask a question with the intent for active listening and then make sure that you're kind of asking the next question. So you're leading that person along. And I would also say sometimes you have to really listen to the other person's point of view because there could be some, not knowing about the situation, right? But there could be some validity in the fact of you clearly see this as a problem, but this other person doesn't see it as a problem. So obviously you're not even communicating. So how do you get to more of that middle ground? Does that resonate?
It does. It does. Still beating my head against a brick wall with him, but definitely with this one particular person, but I will definitely consider that, all those things.
Well, I would also say dealing with difficult people is a whole other training session.
I believe that.
So, yeah.
I believe that. And yes,
Yeah.
I tend to be aggressive as opposed to passive aggressive, as it's a New York thing, right?
Sure, sure, sure. So Karen is my big. I will uh, uh, set the stage here, and we're both from Long Island, New York. And I will tell you, Karen, in the beginning we talked about that poll, right, of like watching
Yes.
your opponent cry. That
Uh-huh.
is my New York. I mean, that is my that is. I mean, I don't know how else to
Yes.
put it, right?
Yes.
And over time in a professional environment, I've been able to refine that a little bit more.
Yes, which is, yes, important and something I'm still working on. So,
There you
okay,
go.
thank you very much. And I know you'll, and well, thanks.
No problem. No problem. Yes. Asking asking questions to kind of identify and make sure you're on the same page. The other thing in general, I will say, is it's really effective to help. I call it the my big fat Greek wedding philosophy, and I swear I do use this in my professional life, and I use this with my team too when I coach people. So I know it's annoying, but if you can get the other person to think that the idea was theirs, sometimes they're more apt to go along with it much easier. I know it sucks. I'm not saying anything, but it's a good technique sometimes you got to have in your toolbox, okay? So sometimes you've got to lead the person through the decision and hold their hand. And again, asking questions can be really effective, and helping them lead along to even see that there is a problem as well can also be really effective. All right. Oh, there's more messages. Okay, sorry. Is there another one we want to deal with before we go into uh, salary negotiations? Okay. All right. Okay. So let's go into salary negotiations. We've got about 15 minutes left. So I know that there were a lot of questions about salary negotiations, and I purposely changed the language on this slide to say compensation negotiations. And I will tell you now, number one, I made a big boo-boo when I first got out of school. I did not negotiate my salary. If you've heard me speak before, I think I tell the story a lot. So I graduated from college, and I was in a lot of debt. My father had just died. Um, I had zero money to me at all, and I had to get a job to eat. I mean, it was I look back at it now, but it was very true. So when I was doing job searching, I wasn't necessarily going for the highest possible salary. I really was trying to find a lifeline. And I also didn't have anyone to kind of coach me or tell me what I should be doing. The other blunder I made is I didn't research my salary for my geo. I went to school at University of Dayton, as I shared, in Dayton, Ohio. I gave a desired salary band for Dayton, Ohio, but I got a job in California. That wasn't so good. So on paper, the salary that I got for California looked fantastic and was higher than what I had asked for. However, it was significantly lower than the average for that particular geo. And I will tell you, it took a long time to make that right. So I will say yes, I think you should negotiate salary, especially coming out of the job, but I also think you should think bigger. So, and this is not where I have a tremendous amount of expertise. I've been at Intel. I interned there and have been there for like 21 years. So this is what I have suggestions for you. um, but opinions are like belly buttons, and everyone has one. Okay. With that being said, number one, so using Margaret's process here of the assess, I would say think bigger. You actually have more options than just salary than you think, right? So that's why I said compensation. So compensation is salary, bonus, stock, retirement, benefits. If you live, outside of the US, maybe you get fantastic healthcare benefits. But if you live here in the US, you actually have to think about that. And it could be health and dental and vision and all of those gym memberships can even fall in here. Vacation could be paid or unpaid time off. Flexibility, part-time, full-time, hourly, other perks. All of this is part of the big bucket of compensation. And you also have to understand the negotiation power of the other person, because I will tell you, I am a manager. I've had these conversations with many people. I've done hiring before, and I have a limited pull when it comes to hiring because I work in a very regulated 100,000 person company, right? So HR is the one who normally does the hiring, salary bands per what the job is required. So I personally myself have a little bit of power when it comes to yearly reviews, but when it comes to actually what the salary of the person is going to come in, I am probably not the best person to do that negotiation with. However, sometimes it's good to have that conversation. So I will share with you, I did recently hire someone on. The person had asked for a raise, which I could not do because it was an internal transfer. However, I put that in the back of my head. And I know this person has merit increases coming up. So I definitely am thinking about that when I'm thinking about this person's performance and how I'm going to reward this person at the end of the year. So I will say that when you're thinking about compensation negotiations, think bigger, because sometimes they may not budge on salary, but maybe they'll budge on something that's more important to you, like flexibility, right? In this pandemic time where the world forgot to wash its hands, it becomes really challenging. I have two coworkers upstairs sucking my bandwidth right now. And to me, flexibility of being able to go and check on them and make sure they're not burning down the house is a big meaningful to me, right? So in the prepare section here, where I say you've got to know your worth, because remember my big blunder was not knowing my worth of the California market. You need to know your worth. You can use Glassdoor, you can use salary bands. I'm a member of IEEE. IEEE tends to do some salary publishing, so you can get an idea of your title and role in your geo. You got to figure out that information ahead of time. And then you got to know what you value, because sometimes you might willing to give, like I said, on the salary, if you maybe got part-time work, or maybe you had more flexibility, or maybe you were able to negotiate what you would have gotten in a salary bump into extra vacation. Think about how to translate that. And there, by the way, there are tax implications on that, my friends. So um, salary is great, but if you can think about what are some of the other benefits you might get that may not be taxable, you gotta bake that in. Especially as you get older in your career, you really got to think about the bigger picture and playing with all of those variables. Um, Maybe you're willing to give up something for something else, right? And then always think about, again, this is about problem solving. Well, the other person at the end, for instance, I'm a manager. I got to get work done. I do expect an amount of productivity from my group that we're all accountable for and we have to get done. So when I have someone who comes to me and says, I can I get time off, or whatever that negotiation is, I am very willing to have a conversation of how do we make both of us happy? How do we make sure that we get done what the team needs to get done, and make sure that that person also gets their refresh time, their time to recoup as well. Okay, so reading through here, Karen, another one of my buds. Salary negotiation in the past, found success in shooting a little bit more than what you can get, knowing you'll end up somewhere in the middle. Yes, I definitely agree with that one when you're actually doing that compensation. In fact, when you get to the ask part, and I've got the 2 bullets here, first of all, I will always remind you, what do you have to lose? I have to mentally talk about this in my head sometimes. I have to remind myself, what do you got to lose? Because sometimes you don't got anything to lose. All you got is to gain, but there's nothing to lose. So really encouraging yourself to having that courage to have that conversation. And then when you're actually talking more brass knuckles when it comes to salary ranges, I would steer you into talking about bands of salary or ballparks, especially in the earlier stages. And I definitely support Karen Gleason's comment in regards of higher up in the ballpark is probably a good place to start, especially from a salary perspective where you know that there's going to be some meeting in the middle. But also I also invite you to think about compensation in a broader term, you know, not just salary, but thinking about those other things that are important to you and that are meaningful. And that all is up to you. The last one here is how do you know what is negotiable versus the company standard? Okay, so sometimes this is a conversation with the manager. So I've been in situations, I work, like I said, I work at Intel, and I am a stickler for actually reading the HR handbook. And the HR handbook, from an Intel point of view, says about. So when you first started Intel, I think you get about 3 weeks vacation, and it's up to a managerial discretion. So that gives you some wiggle room or negotiation power to even talk to your boss. So I think it does depend on the company. I think smaller companies may have a little bit more flexibility because they may not be able to pay a high commanding salary, but they may have other benefits to their total compensation. But again, I think it's an ask. It's an ask to the person that you're negotiating with. Let's see. Sometimes it's more strict than others. Definitely from a vacation policy point of view, my husband works in an organization where he still has to keep track of like the amount of hours that he'll take off in a day, which is weird to me because I never grew up like that. You know, um, I grew up in an environment where you're sick, stay home, or you got to get a kid to somewhere, you just get the kid to somewhere. Um, but different companies have different policies. All right, so I think I got all of the comments. All right, so this comes to the end of the presentation. So I have these slides, I'll publish these slides out, and I have more resources from Margaret Neal. This is just scratching the surface. There's a whole lot more. She has a book, she has a YouTube page, and I personally, like I said, have used this within my professional negotiations. So I highly recommend her. I don't think she has a fan club, but she totally should, and you should totally join it. So we've come to the end of the session. I wanted to open up if there's any other questions. We've got about 5 minutes left. I really thank you for being here and letting me share this with you. This is one of the things I really enjoy doing. Any other questions? I see that there's some good comments here too. That yeah, everything is negotiable, especially when you think about it's a problem to solve. Let's see. How do you build the confidence to ask even after you assess and prepare? Knowing my worth and what I can ask for, I'm still not confident talking to the manager. Okay, Erin, one more tip for you. So, and again, I actually did this in real life. So remember how I talked about in the beginning, I shot myself up in the foot because I did my salary negotiations for a California market based on Ohio market. Okay, this is God, hand to God, this is what I did. So about 4 or 5 years later, I went back and I did some job searching. So 5 years after I got hired on in 2004, I actually ended up here in Arizona, which is where I am now. And what I did was I felt that I was underpaid, and I went to jobs equivalent of my title and scope and skills in Dayton, Ohio, and I printed them out and I highlighted the salary band, and I put the stack of those papers on my boss's desk, and I said, fix it. Now, maybe that's a little bit too New Yorky. Maybe it's a little forward. Okay. But it worked, and I got a 2-digit raise. Come focal. So one of the things I would say, that confidence, sometimes that confidence has to be a little bit kind of anger, like you know what you're worth. And if you're underpaid, that company has the obligation, moral obligation, I would even argue, to fix it. Because let's be frank. Remember I said even a nonprofit, they're out to make money. Companies have to make money. They have to employ you to do a job for a certain number, and ideally they would love to pay you as little as possible. That's the truth, right? So you have to be comfortable with what they're paying you, and you have to feel as if they're getting their money's worth, right? So that is a tactic that I've actually personally done, that I think is, yes, it's a very forward strategy. I'm definitely not the passive aggressive one at all. But I think it also helps with the confidence. Confidence comes with data. You're all very data driven. Go and do the research, grab the data, and that, I think, helps build that confidence story. All right, so we're coming up on close. I'm trying to read the comments. Thank you so much to everybody. I really appreciate all of your attention, and I miss seeing all of your faces. But I am absolutely here to help if you got any follow-up questions. Thank you so much for your time, and I loved sharing this information with you. So thank you. I will pause my sharing, and I will come back to the video hopefully, and I will wave. So thanks again. Enjoy your day, and please, I think there's a feedback form to fill out. So please take some time to do that as well. All right, Kat, I'm sure you're lurking here somewhere.
I'm here.